Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Bombe wash processed Ethiopia from Father's Coffee Roastery. And there's the bag right there. And Father is based out of Ostrava, Czech Republic, and this is their second ever appearance on this channel, having recently reviewed an anaerobic honey processed Colombian coffee, which to my surprise turned out a lot better than initially expected. And what we typically like to do when we're trying out a new coffee roaster for the first time is to try one of their washed and one of their non-wash processed coffees. So this right here is every coffee roaster's bread and butter, a wash processed Ethiopian. So we will see how this one turned out, as this right here is day 31. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe, a 16:1 water to coffee ratio brewed at 205 degrees Fahrenheit. I like this one best through the Chemex as well, which of course indicates a more medium grind. Roast profile for this coffee, this one felt a little lighter than the previous Father's coffee we had reviewed, and it actually had a pretty interesting brightness that was quite reminiscent to the lightness of a roaster like Doc. Pretty light cup of coffee in general. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 15, first impression, and this is what I was kind of insinuating in terms of that roast profile, is the cup had a slightly grassy aspect in the aroma, and it was present in the cup itself as it came out slightly unbalanced with this savory herbal quality, kind of contrasting a nondescript brightness. Slight earthiness in the cup too, so it didn't necessarily leave the best first impression, and I feel like a lot of the reason for that was this coffee needed even more rest than the 15 days we gave it. Day 17, ran it through the Chemex, and it was a much better second impression as it did come out a little cleaner, a little bit more focused with an emphasis on the stone fruit-like aspect in the cup with an additional pastry-like sweetness. So that was already a lot better, but in addition to that, there was a slightly nutty, slightly floral aspect that was, well, very reminiscent of a lot of wash-processed Ethiopians. So it was already better. The brew method definitely played a huge role in this coffee. Day 19, back through the V60, and it was a similar impression to that initial try as it came out slightly grassy yet again, and that was a lot of the issue I continued to see with the V60 is, for whatever reason, it came out a lot more grassy in that brew method. There's a slight bit more florality in the cup in this sense, as there's a continuous array of slight stone fruits to kind of contrast this savory tea-like aspect to the cup. But at this time, it was still mostly on the citrus side of things, as the V60 really seemed to bring out a lot of these citric aspects in this coffee. Day 21, it continues to remain two very different cups from the two different brew methods, as on the Chemex it continues to yield significantly better results, and I have a lot of notes listed on this day, because this was a pretty nice day. It has a fair bit of depth, including a super floral honey-forward cup that's complemented by a savory black tea, the stone fruit that cools off into an abundance of citrus. In between that, there's a brightness that can feel slightly grassy, but overall it has a lot of depth and complexity to it, especially for a washed Ethiopian, so I liked that day 21 mark. Day 23, another positive day in the Chemex, and I think at this point I just kind of said, hey, it's just turning out so much better in this brew method. We're going to persist with it, as there is a floral honey aspect in the cup yet again, and it feels somewhat layered as there's plenty of stone fruit aspects to kind of contrast that as well, cooling off into, again, more of the citric and acidic components within this coffee. So it's a little bit of a slight improvement from the previous day, and that's what I'm saying is, just like with the previous Father's coffee, a little bit of an increase in terms of the vibrancy every single time we're brewing it. So this coffee is one of those that feels like it needs a significant amount of rest to get the best. Day 24, back through the Chemex to give it one more shot, and again, it just didn't really seem to be the same, as the black tea components at this time were a little bit more robust. There was a little bit of this milk chocolate that was kind of contrasting that as well. An almost vegetal component, and I keep kind of highlighting the grassiness that was coming from this, very much a lemongrass sort of experience with it, in addition to a fair bit of herbality, so not necessarily enjoying it, and that was kind of the last day I tried the V60. I just couldn't seem to get it right through that brew method. Day 26, back through the Chemex, and it's still improving, as the most defining characteristic at this time is the stone fruit, and that's always going to be a huge selling point to me. They are more clean and even, more of the sweet honey to kind of go with the bright acidity, a little bit more balanced in general, slightly herbal, slightly savory, so I don't mind that, especially when it's kind of contrasted by some really bright fruits. Day 28, final notes we have, the cup is continuing to improve. It's continuing to increase in vibrancy. The brightness is on the forefront of the cup yet again with a high level of florality. Here on day 31, it continues to increase in the vibrancy, and it's continuing to get a lot more flavorful in terms of the components, the flavor, the fruit components in the coffee. Lasting citrus present yet again, honeyed sweetness, more herbality, more savoriness, and a little bit of that lemongrass still. That was persistent throughout the time drinking, and I think it just kind of goes to show the lightness that was present within this coffee. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And just like the coffee, it's actually a fairly clean looking tasting wheel, but let's go through them. A lot of level 4s. We will start with the cleanliness level 4. Yeah, wash processed Ethiopian, very clean cup of coffee. I don't think that there's too much worth saying in that. It's just pretty clean in general. Finish, level 4. Slightly higher side of level 4. I've been kind of pointing towards and highlighting the citric as well as the grassy aspects within this coffee, and it's much better in the Chemex. It's much more tamed in the Chemex, but even then it is actually on the higher side of the level 4. It does leave a little bit of a lasting finish to it. Sweetness, level 4. Yes, fair bit of sweetness. It's in multiple aspects. I've been highlighting the honeyed sweetness that's in this coffee. I've also been highlighting the stone fruit sweetness, both very much present in it and on a bright high level. So I definitely think that it's justified at the level 4, probably right there even at that level 4 mark. Acidity, level 4. Also the higher side of the level 4 mark, actually, because this is a pretty acidic cup of coffee, and I think that goes to kind of show the development that they went with on this one. Very bright coffee, and as I've kind of been hinting at, especially with the V60, can oftentimes even come off a little grassy, but not to the point where it justifies the level 5. I imagine Kenya probably would. Florality, level 4. Yeah, I've been saying that especially the longer you've let this coffee rest, the florals really open up in terms of the brightness. And I think that they have a jasmine note listed on here. That would make a lot of sense. There is a very vibrant and bright floral component to it. Citrus, level 4. That's probably the most pronounced characteristic consistently throughout the time drinking this coffee, especially through the V60. Even then, it is on the higher side of level 4. I'm having a very hard time justifying the level 5 mark, mostly because this coffee still maintains an evenness throughout. While it may be high on some things at certain times, it still just feels a little bit more balanced in general. And the stone fruit at the level 4 mark as well really demonstrates that, because I was getting so much stone fruit, especially right after the coffee has been brewed. It's a little bit more present at the higher temperatures. As it does cool down, it's still present yet again, but it's also complemented by a bunch of contrasting components, including the savoriness, which is reminiscent. I think they have a black tea. They do have a black tea note listed on here. I appreciate that this coffee has a lot more flavor notes listed on it than their previous one, because both of them have had great depth, variety, and complexity to them. This one, they just had a little bit more offerings to it. And I can see everything that they have listed on here. I haven't even discussed the bergamot because I didn't necessarily pull a lot of that out of this coffee, but definitely a lot of citrus in this coffee. Body, level 2. Yeah, definitely lighter body. Nothing really surprising about that. Everything on this tasting wheel at least reached a level 2. So there's a little bit of everything in this coffee, but I really like the way that this tasting wheel looks. I think it's a pretty nice representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, I really liked it. I think I liked, again, the depth and complexity that came from this coffee. I think I just really like the roaster that they use to roast their coffees. And it kind of creates a little bit of just general complexity to it. This one's a little bit more of an enjoyable washed Ethiopian coffee for me, even with the really high bright aspects to it. I can get past the fact that it can be a little grassy, it can be a little acidic, it can be a little bright, because it makes up for it with the very high florality, the very high fruit components, as well as the great sweetness and clarity. The big 4, the 4 marks I always look for, especially when it comes to something like a wash processed Ethiopian coffee. The type of person I would suggest this coffee to, if you do like really bright coffees, because this one still, maybe the most distinct thing was the brightness of the acidity, and you are willing to let it rest a little bit more, because I think this coffee is actually going to improve a lot. It continues to trend in the right direction, and just like with the previous Father's coffee, I have a little bit more of this left, so I'm going to probably go back in a week or so and give this another shot, and I imagine that there will probably be a little bit of improvement, and it might even kind of tone down the really bright aspects. But if you enjoy the bright acidity in coffee and you like those big 4, the clarity, the fruitiness, the sweetness, as well as the florality, then this one's a pretty nice fit for you. I think it's on the better side of washed Ethiopian coffees in general. But for the most part, I think I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well, or anything from Fathers. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Bombe wash processed Ethiopia from Father's Coffee. Thank you for watching.